Against all odds, the Fast and the Furious franchise has evolved into a global phenomenon and one of the most profitable franchises on the market right now. Over the years though, the cast has had to follow some pretty strict and interesting rules when participating in the movies. Some of these rules were one-off deals, while others carried over to the next movie. From not appearing weak to having to go to driving school and keeping their egos in check, there was a lot of boxes to tick for this franchise to continue driving. Despite moving on to becoming a heist series and now an action spy franchise, the Fast and the Furious' bread and butter is still fast cars. The series started off as a street racing series, and part of the fun was seeing the ridiculously tuned up cars race against each other. But this is where Hollywood comes in and works its movie magic. Despite having so many fast cars in the series, not one of them is actually real. Yeah, the cars featured in the movie are all stunt cars. They have a series of stunt chassis that's designed to allow the crew to place mock car bodies on top of it that look like their real-world counterparts. Driving those cars for real would be too dangerous for the principal cast, and filming a car going 100 miles per hour isn't very practical. So while it may have looked like Paul and Vin were speeding along in their respective cars, they weren't really driving those cars. Sometimes they didn't even have control of the wheel, such as this shot from The Fate of the Furious, which saw the stunt driver sit on top of the car with full control. So the main actors aren't as hands-on with the cars as you may have thought. But despite not being very hands-on with the cars, the actors were still expected to know how to drive. This is Fast and the Furious after all, and the cast has to at least appear like they know what they're doing. But when pre-production casting was underway for the very first film in the franchise, some of the actors didn't even have their driver's license. Yeah, in a movie about street racing, Jordana Brewster and Michelle Rodriguez, who play Mia and Letty respectively, didn't know how to drive a car. We have to wonder how they got around, as the pair were not big-name actresses at the time. So the producers made the pair get their license for the movie, despite not being able to do much in the way of actual driving on set. The mandate would carry over to future films, with Devon Aoki having to get her license for Too Fast, Too Furious. Aoki played Suki, the driver with the pink Dodge Viper, a seriously fast car, so the producers obviously wanted her scenes to look as real as possible, as opposed to faking it and being unsure about her movements. But it was more than a few driver's licenses that were required to get production underway. Whether the actors already knew how to drive or just passed their test, all of the actors had to go to driving school for the very first Fast and Furious film. The cast may not be driving the cars for real, but they have to sell the illusion that they are. So much like how some actors have to go to a boot camp for an action-heavy movie, this cast, which included Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, and Jordana Brewster, had to do a driving school session in Las Vegas. But it was more than just driving laps and learning how to control the car while it was doing great speeds. Some of the actors even got to take a spin in some Formula 1 cars, according to the Wrap. We are not entirely sure what the point of driving an F1 car is other than having fun, but if they did get the chance to get behind the wheel of one of those cars, consider us at ScreenRant very jealous. We'd love to see them steal an F1 car in Furious 9 and then take that for a spin. This particular entry didn't start off as a rule and still isn't one, to be fair, but it is something that the franchise does continue to encourage. That thing, of course, is improvising on set. Some directors are very strict about having no improvisation on set, as they want the script to be replicated word for word. But a report stated that the fight scene between Brian and Vince in the first Fast and Furious movie was actually scrapped because Paul Walker and Matt Schultz felt it didn't come across as natural. So the duo actually ended up improvising the scene, building it up until it came out to their liking. That idea of adapting a scene on the fly would then carry over to the sequel, as the source notes on how Paul and Matt came to improvising an entire fight scene on the fly, why they did it, and what chances they made carried over as director John Singleton filmed parts of the movie on the fly. And as we know, Johnson improvised the hysterical forehead line from the 6th entry, and we know that Ryan Reynolds' Game of Thrones rants were entirely off script.
To hide your baby, or
you better hide that big ass forehead. That was just joke.
If there's one thing that any fan of the Fast and Furious can agree on, is that the series was most certainly not planned out in advance. The 4th through 6th entries in the series actually served as prequels to the 3rd film, but the technology in cars didn't reflect this, so making these movies on the fly seems to be a staple for not only the series, but the characters as well. Aside from Han, the character that comes to mind for that situation is that of Letty. In the first film, she served as the tough girlfriend to Vin Diesel's Dom, but like him, was nowhere to be found in the following 2 sequels. so the hype was certainly there for Fast and Furious, which reunited most of the original cast. But Letty actually died in that movie, or so we thought. Audiences learned she survived in the after-credits scene for the following movie, with Eva Mendes as Monica Fuentes showing Hobbs a security still featuring a very alive Letty. Like us though, Michelle Rodriguez learned of her character's return to the franchise upon seeing that scene as well. The studio must have really been confident that she would return. This is a golden rule for any movie or television show, and it's no exception for the Fast and Furious franchise. The actors in those movies get paid a handsome paycheck for bringing those movies to life, and in exchange for working on set, the studio also expects them to help promote the film in the weeks and months leading up to the release. This is actually one of the strictest rules the actors have to follow, despite being one of the most banal. See, if the actors start bailing on press junkets, interviews, or the premiere, they could face steep consequences, including being fired from the franchise itself. Of course, they can't go off and rail on a movie or a co-star during these junkets. What they have to say is actually heavy controlled and dictated by the PR team. So much like acting, these responses and interactions are very rehearsed in practice, so the actors are saying exactly what the studio and producers want them to say. That's why if you watch a press interview with a certain publication and then venture over to another publication, the answers and questions are eerily similar to one another, but without this, there would be no movie. Going hand in hand with talking to the press is what exactly they can say to the press or share on social media. As previously mentioned, the responses these actors give are carefully controlled and crafted in order to give a response that will be broad enough to not give away anything important. And that's the golden rule. The Fast and Furious actors are contractually obligated not to reveal any spoilers to anyone. The whole idea of a movie is to surprise the audience, to dangle the carrot in front of them, which in turn gets them to buy a ticket to the movie. If the actors start spilling the beans about what's going to happen in the movie before it releases, the whole campaign falls apart. They have to remain vigilant and not give in to any temptations. Even worse though, some interviewers may phrase a question in such a way that a spoiler may inadvertently get revealed, so the actors have to really be on their toes in order to not let anything accidentally slip out. In other words, Universal doesn't want any of their actors to become Tom Holland and start spoiling the whole movie. How that kid gets away with the amount of leaks he's revealed is beyond us. There are a lot of clashing egos on the set of Fast and Furious. None more notable than the current beef between Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson. Whether they squash the beef or not remains to be seen, but Johnson has stepped into his own franchise without Vin Diesel. Thankfully for Johnson, he's one of the most profitable names in the business right now and thus was granted that opportunity. The same can't be said for Ja Rule. Remember Ja Rule? He had a small part in the very first movie as one of the drag racers, but the rapper and aspiring actor got a little too full of himself, John Singleton revealed in an interview. Ja Rule was actually slated to return for the sequel, Too Fast, Too Furious, and was offered $500,000 to return to the franchise as the same character in a larger role. But Ja Rule saw that as too small a sum for his talents and as such was cut from the movie. That's when Ludacris was brought in to play a whole new character who in turn has been a mainstay in the franchise ever since the 5th film. We think Luda owes Ja Rule a thank you. The bread and butter for any actor is their contract. When it comes to the big franchises, contractual agreements between the actors and the studio has both its upside and downside. That's the case for the actors in the Fast and Furious franchise, who are contractually obligated to appear in sequels. This may not have been the case early in the franchise, but now that the franchise is a money-making machine, the contracts have changed, and the cast is expected to continue to come back for more. But as we said, there is an upside as well as a downside to this. For one, actors can expect a pay raise for each movie they return to, but on the downside, returning to the same franchise time and time again limits their options to work on other films. Ludacris actually spoke briefly about his contract and the process behind it. Seeing as how he doesn't act in too many movies, he's all for renegotiating his contract for the 9th and 10th films. Does that mean there will be a 10th film? No, but if they do decide to go down that road, Ludacris and the others are contractually obligated to show. If the Furious franchise could do what they do on screen for real, that would be incredible. But this is the movies, and the safety of the actors is paramount. There's also the case that shooting at a certain location may be too dangerous or unrealistic, so the Fast and Furious franchise have to expect to shoot on green screen for many scenes. Sure, the franchise takes us around the world to all sorts of exotic locales like Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Havana, Tokyo, and Abu Dhabi, but a lot of the action sequences are made with the help of CGI and green screen magic. magic. So the actors have to get used to the fact that while it'll look cool on screen, most of their work is inside a barren studio surrounded by green walls. Not the most glamorous of times, but they have to put that kind of work in to make the shot happen. Acting against green screen can be difficult for actors, as there is no reference point, so the actors have to really imagine the scene and give it their all to make up for the limited information given to them. More of a guideline than a rule, this example showcases that the actors may have to chase down a certain scene to be put in the movie. You'd think that they wouldn't have to, considering they're the ones bringing the scenes to life, but sometimes an actor wants to do more than just talk. For instance, Ludacris's Tej was one of the few bright spots in the second film, and fans were very happy when he returned to Fast 5 as the tech-savvy computer whiz to help out with their heist. But Ludacris didn't want to just be known for doing computer stuff in the Fast and the Furious films, a series that's known for its, well, ludicrous action scenes. The rapper turned actor wanted in on the action scenes, going as far as submitting a demo reel of his skills to series producer and leading man Vin Diesel. Tej certainly has had more to do in the recent films, compared to his appearances in the first few films, getting his own fight scene in Furious 7. Looks like all the determination and drive to be in an action scene paid off for Ludacris, as he finally got the moment he wanted, and he definitely had to impress his superiors to get the scene. If you were working as a principal actor on the set of the Fast and Furious films, we bet you'd be pretty attached to the car they'd give you. Each of the lead cars in the franchise have been memorable for car fanatics over the years, whether it's Dom's 1970 Dodge Charger, Han's Mazda RX-7 Veilside in Tokyo Drift, or Brian's Nissan Skyline from Too Fast, Too Furious. They're all pretty memorable, but one shouldn't get too attached to these cars. The studio actually has all the prop cars destroyed after the movie is wrapped production and any reshoots, meaning those cars no longer actually exist in their original form. The reason for the destruction, according to Fascinate, does seem a bit odd. The studio stated the reason for the destruction of the vehicles is to ensure they don't fall into the hands of fans who may try to replicate their favorite scenes. Perhaps they were worried about theft or the cars eventually going to auction, but considering some diehard fans of the series and of tuner cars have actually replicated the cars on their own, it doesn't seem like destroying the original cars is going to stop dangerous driving. The Fast and Furious films are chock full of crazy stunts and action that have helped elevate the series into the stratosphere. Come on, how many of you fondly remember the heist sequence from Fast 5 or the parachuting cars from Furious 7? Yeah, that's what we thought. Needless to say though, the actors have to go through quite a bit of stunt training to work on a lot of these scenes. Despite there being stunt teams who do a lot of the heavy lifting for the scenes, the actors still have to do some of their own stunts. This is most true for whenever there's a hand-to-hand combat scene and the camera has no choice but to show the actor's face. The actors are then required to do hours upon hours of fight choreography to get the scene just right. Case in point, the climactic battle between Shaw and Dom at the end of Furious 7. The scene would not have been the same if it was focused on the arms and legs. Sure, there's a decent amount of cuts, but we can at least tell the actors are doing the scene. Likewise, learning the choreography allows for the VFX department to save some funds by not having to CGI the actor's face onto a stunt double. This one is more about a broken rule, but since it's so juicy, we're including it. It's not really a secret anymore that Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel aren't exactly best buddies right now. In Fate of the Furious, the two actors actually never appeared on screen together at the same time. During the dinner celebration on the rooftop, either actor can be seen in the background avoiding the other. Part of the reason for Hobbs and Shaw's existence was for Johnson to continue in the franchise while doing his own thing. That's because Vin Diesel, who's an executive producer on the mainline series, was getting a bit too hands-on for Johnson's liking. As an actor on the series, Johnson had to march to Diesel's drum, who was apparently cutting some of Johnson's scenes and then changing the schedule. We can understand why Johnson would be angry about this, especially considering how busy he is. Instead of sorting this out behind closed doors, the duo got into something of a squabble on social media, a beef that has been reignited with the release of Hobbs and Shaw, with Tyrese calling out the movie's box office debut, which caused Johnson to retort with a tweet saying, "The best way to shut the mouth of a clown is to flex with success and a smile." Speaking of testosterone and egos, get a load of this. In the days leading up to the release of Hobbs and Shaw, a spin-off film in the Furious universe and starring Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham, a story from the Wall Street Journal made the rounds concerning the contracts that the leading men of the Fast and Furious franchise have stimulated about their prowess on screen. In other words, there is apparently a clause in all of their contracts that forbid them to appear weak or lose a fight in their movies. Statham's contract states that there is a hard line which dictates how bad badly he can be beaten in a fight. Vin Diesel has his sister, a producer on the main franchise, dictate how many punches he receives, while Johnson has a special editing team that overrides the primary editors of the movie to cut any scene to make him appear more awesome and tougher. He also has his own producers and stunt coordinators. Seeing as all three characters now play heroes in the franchise, it's a bit bizarre knowing about these clauses, considering that by the end of the movie, the good guys always win. Considering the, rocky relationship between Johnson and Diesel, we have to wonder if this is an ego thing. One thing's for sure, in all 8 of the main films, the hero has never actually lost a fight. Gotten away, sure, but outright been humiliated? No. Those are some of the rules that the actors involved in the Fast and Furious franchise have to follow. Some of them are your bread and butter that you would expect to find on any film set, but some of them, including driving schools and not coming across as weak on screen, are pretty interesting and unique. What are your thoughts on some of the rules they have to follow? Are Statham, Johnson, and Diesel being a bit overprotective about their image on screen? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.